let the light guide the way and hold every memory as you go. And every road you take will always lead you home. And I think we forget that sometimes. We forget about the way back. We forget about how do we get home. And it's interesting because just the other day, we were talking about the days before satellite maps, before you could get in your car and click on where you were going or put on your phone with the Waze where you wanted to go and how it would take you. And we were talking about when you used to go on a road trip, you would have to actually get a map out and look at the map and figure your way of how you're going to get from point A to point B. And generally, somewhere between that point A and point B, you had to stop 5,000 times and ask people directions. And sometimes you'd end up where you were going and other times you didn't. Now, I know there's some people on this Zoom room today that are too young to remember those days. They're too young to remember the map days and only know the technology days. And that's fine because that's progress and that's how life and things evolve. But when you think about these signposts in our life, these signs that we constantly are looking for to get us to someplace or to get us home, the signs, the way to directionally go has probably been around since the time humans have been on this earth. Going from one community to the next, where they would find a little pile of rocks that were made or a branch that was broken to point in the direction of how do you get from here to there? How do you move in a place that is maybe the most direct from point A to point B? And even now, as things have evolved, that we find ourselves now in the 21st century, even in the last 50 years, so much has changed that now we have this mechanical voice that comes at us and tells us not only what roads to turn on, but how many feet or meters it's going to be. And if we miss it, it reroutes us in another direction. And with all of that good, with all of that technology, I don't know about you, but I have seen videos posted where people are driving their cars into a fountain or into a lake or down a one-way street, because what they're doing is they're listening to this mechanical voice and not paying attention to the signs. They're not paying attention to what's in front of them. And they're using only one of their senses in order to do that. And when you watch these videos, you're kind of like, how can this happen? How can somebody not pay attention? And literally when you see a sign that says, or something that says, fountain ahead or lake ahead or one-way street, how do you not think in your common sense, maybe I shouldn't do that? Maybe I shouldn't do that. But we're not paying attention to the signs. We're not paying attention to what's right in front of us. And when we look at, in some ways, the bigger picture of signs, what is that? What is the sense that we find through our life, those times, those signposts, those areas, the pile of rocks, the broken branch, whatever it happens to be, that directs us to that next part of where we need to be? Do we see it and ignore it? Do we not see it because we're listening to something else or someone else? Why have we missed along the way some of these things that we say, oh, if I had only listened to myself in that moment of time? If I had only thought to go within, if I had only thought, then maybe that road would have brought me home. And a lot of times we talk about our five senses, right? Our seeing and our hearing and our feeling and our touch and our smell and our taste. We're talking about the normal everyday senses, and we exclude another normal everyday sense, which is our internal and eternal when you think about it, but our internal GPS system, which is our intuition, our guidance, that thing that we are born with. We don't have to subscribe to. We don't have to pay a monthly fee for. We don't have to periodically update it. It's all there. It's all God-given within who we are. And in that and with that internal GPS system, our guidance is always with us. The signposts are always with us if we choose to listen, if we choose to trust. And isn't that always the stumbling block for so many of us? And I'll raise my hand on that one too, because as much as I use my intuition and my inner ability sense, there's a lot of times that I've looked at life and I said, oh, if only I had listened to myself on that time. But what happens is we get into the trappings of our other senses, don't we? We get into the trappings of what are other people saying and what are we hearing that they say. And we forget to not only go in, but we forget to connect to that greater power that's around us. We think that reality is what we see. We think that is our reality. And in some ways, we have to live within the world and as the reality is as we know it. But if we never see beyond it through our spiritual eyes, through our intuitive sensing, if we never look beyond, then we don't see. If we never listen beyond, then we don't hear. And I'm always in awe of when we do sessions or readings, sittings, whatever we want to label that, and other people, what's the thing that most people want to know? They want to know, what is the sign from their loved one in the spirit world? What are they trying to send to them to let them know that they are around? And sometimes there are things that the spirit world can do to kind of get our awareness, get our attention to something. But also sometimes it is just our awareness, just our sensing, just our intuitive feeling of what's around, who's around, why are they around? And not always just because we can see something or hear something. Our connectiveness goes far beyond technology. You know, it is really wonderful that we're on this Zoom together, that we've been able to, through technology, keep in touch and keep working. But it's not just this. And I think sometimes we forget, because we are so geared into what can technology provide, that we forget how can't even say the word, technology, we are so more advanced than that if we and when we look at what we can do. How many people, how many times have we felt and been lost driving around, going somewhere, forgetting about perhaps that, you know, we saw the sign to go this way, but you know what, Waze is telling us to go this way, or GPS is telling us to go this way, because it's going to save more time. Because with that, they're looking to shorten the time that you're actually in your car or your vehicle, which a lot of times makes sense. But it takes away sometimes the adventure of what happens if we go that way. What would we see? What would we learn? What would we feel if we maybe took a longer way around? If we went the way where we could perhaps see the forest and not the highway? Why do we intuitively shut ourselves down, shut our adventures down? Some might say it's because we've been taught not to listen to ourselves. We've been taught not to go into our feelings, not to, and only taught to do, hear, say what we physically can do, hear, and say. And I believe through not just my experience, but what I've heard other people experience, when they start to be listening, really listening to their self, to their own intuitive sensing, when they really start to connect with the energy that's around us, the power that's around us. If you want to call that God, if you want to call that the spirit world, if you want to call that whatever you want to call that. But when we start that connectiveness, rather than pushing a button, we actually start to live a little bit more. We actually start to get into attunement with the energy that we are and the energy that also touches in with all of the other energy around us. And yes, like the radio wave or a microwave or a Wi-Fi wave, it's not something that you can always see. You may see the result of it, but it's not always something that you see. But if you allow yourself, you will feel it. You will feel the change in you, the difference in you, by starting to understand that we do know things, that we can feel things, that we can see things beyond what we're looking at around us. Most of us, some of us are lucky. I wasn't one of those people that was always taught from the time I was little about these things, to trust our instinct, to trust our intuitiveness, to work outside, of the box, outside of the framework. I wasn't taught that, not because I was in a difficult family situation, but my parents didn't understand that. They didn't understand that. So therefore, I never was taught it. But can you imagine, just imagine, if every child was taught to start to trust their own gut feeling, their own intuition? Can you imagine if every child was taught to connect to the energy around them and not through, virtual reality, and to actually be in the reality of what is capable? Can you imagine what this world would be? Because then, my friends, nobody would be able to tell an untruth, because you would sense it. Nobody would be able to harm anybody, because we would be aware of it. Can you imagine that change in this world? Can you imagine what technology has done for us to this point? Can you imagine what that would do for us? But it's not something that's talked about a lot, and it's not something that is certainly pushed a lot. The only thing that we can do is work with that within ourselves. Begin to trust it, begin to learn from it, and begin to expand with it. Our internal GPS will never land us in a fountain or a lake or down a one-way street if we learn how to trust it and work with it. And that connectiveness that feeling of oneness with energy, that will be the road that will always lead us home. We won't be lost. So sometimes during, hopefully this week, if some of these words reflect to you some truth within you, please take the time for yourself. Please take the time for yourself to sit in that power, to sit in the oneness of who you are and connect. But trust who you are, trust what you bring to this world, and trust what you can create in this world through who you are and through that energy, not just the energy that we find by pressing a button and turning on a computer or turning on the GPS in our car or turning on our phone. Connect with your power and keep that light within you. So thank you for listening, and thank you for being part again of our journey together this morning.